I have no magic. Oop, okay. And while I'm getting this changed over, you can go ahead and put 5s in the thing now, because I mean, it's just gonna be, right? I mean, it's, nope, I'm good, thanks. Yes, I have a toy computer. I'm ready whenever it switches over. That was magical, thank you. So it's funny, there's things that we should all like be able to just agree on, right? Because history's written and we all know what it is and so forth. And so, one of the things that we talk about is, okay, where did the DevOps movement start? And you've probably read it and seen it and so forth, but I have a little bit different take. I think the DevOps movement started at a lodge in Snowbird, Utah on February 11th and 13th, 2001. Anybody know what happened at Snowbird in this time? 17 people got together and they wrote a thing called the Agile Manifesto, which is we value this over that and so forth. It's not an Agile talk, so I'm not going to go a lot into the manifesto. But the reason that I think this is where the DevOps movement started is if you go to agilemanifesto.org, you look at the principles behind Agile. The first principle is this. So in 2001, these 17 individuals, who by the way didn't agree on very much, did agree that the highest priority was getting value to customers quickly. But the truth is, didn't really have a lot of good ways to do it at the time, from a technology perspective, process perspective, and other things. And so, to me, the number one principle out of 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto went unfulfilled for several years. So this talk, DevOps and DevOpsDays, has a couple purposes. Partially, it's to level set. As was mentioned, I'm one of the organizers for the Global DevOps Days, as well as Maddie up here in the front. And I'd like to kick off these so you know what to expect over the next couple days, why things are done the way they're done, how you can take best advantage of it, and so forth. So hence this talk. So the obligatory about me. ThoughtWorks, for some reason, pays me to talk about DevOps and continuous delivery. I'm coming up on 10 years there, as I mentioned, DevOps Days organizer. If you follow me on Twitter, you might see that I'm a little bit caught up, maybe too much, on definitions. This word means exactly this, and et cetera. And so I'm trying to get better at that. This is going to go through some of this today. So a lot of the stuff that's on the timeline, on this particular timeline, which I just basically threw together, there's other, of course, big events and so forth. But I want to go through some of them because, again, they kind of build up into what I think DevOps is. And hopefully it will help you understand where those things come from and so forth. And so as I mentioned, after the Agile Manifesto, there was a pretty big gap where we didn't really make a lot of progress in getting things into the hands of the customers. Continuous integration got really big. I think cruise control came out in 2001. But continuous integration was typically, I have a build and I can give it to QA now, or I can give it to security now, or I can give it to whoever now. It's still not the customer. It's probably a customer advocate. At Agile 2006, and this is how old some of this stuff is, these three gentlemen presented a white paper called the Deployment Production Line. And it was one of the first things where people said, look, we need to get this software onto a production-like environment as often as possible. If for no other reason than to know it works. Because they're building stuff on CI and deploying it, and then what do you know? Hey, it didn't work, and that's bad. And so they wanted to get on production-like environments a lot faster. So they presented this white paper. The same year, Werner Vogels from Amazon, CTO of Amazon, is quoted as saying, you build it, you run it. And this quote you'll see a lot in a lot of DevOps movements and so forth, DevOps writings and so forth. And basically what it means is that they have product teams and they build a service and those people own that service. There's a gentleman by the name of John Willis who says from idea to cha-ching. And it basically means that from what could this thing be through the maintenance years later and running it and so forth, the team owns it. And this has become fairly core to a lot of DevOps messages, but I think a lot of times we forget the why. They don't expect you to read the whole slide. But the point is, of the why Amazon did this and why I say you should do it, is we want to get in with the day-to-day operation. Oops, didn't do that, and the pen didn't work. The day-to-day operation of the software. And so we want the people developing the software, coming up with the requirements, call them user stories, call them whatever you want, to have day-to-day access to their customers. So it goes from, the definition of done goes from this made our, code complete to this made our business better. We deployed this thing and it resulted in more business. That's why Amazon did it. Amazon didn't do it to pay less ops people. Contrary to popular belief, Amazon was not built on AWS. They had a pretty good system, but AWS was a product from the very beginning. But they did it because they wanted to get in contact with the customer. They wanted to know that if they made a change to the website, they sold more shoes or less shoes. It really was that simple. 2 years after that, at Agile 2008, you might notice, again, this is why I start with the Magic Manifesto, is a lot of this stuff happened at Agile conferences. At Agile 2008, a gentleman by the name of Andrew Clay Schaefer suggested what they call a birds of the feather session. It's just attendee-driven content, and we're going to get into somehow you're going to do that later today and tomorrow too. And Andrew proposed this session. He called it Agile Infrastructure. And one person showed up, a gentleman by the name of Patrick Dubois. And when I say one person showed up, I mean that literally. Andrew didn't show up. A lot of times when you suggest these sessions, just because you suggest something doesn't mean you end up going there. Something more interesting might come up. But they did meet in the hallway later, and they talked about more what they meant by Agile Infrastructure. And really, they were talking about some of the automation of how do we update our operating systems and our app servers and so forth, because this was still 10 years ago. Docker wasn't out yet. The next year, there was a conference in Amsterdam called Velocity, and John Allspaw and Paul Hammond did a talk called 10 Deploys a Day at Flickr. So Flickr is a photo sharing site, and they were doing 10 deploys to production per day, and that just blew people's minds. They're like, no way. There's a story, I don't know how true it is, that when Yahoo bought Flickr, they were like, yeah, no, we're not going to let you do that because it's not safe. And they said, let us prove to you that it's more safe. And they did, and hence that. As far as I can tell, that is the first tweet ever that used the term DevOps. That's Andrew Clay Schaefer on 23 June 2009. Talking about that, Patrick Dubois answered, said, hey, Dev meet Ops, Ops meet Dev. DevOps Days 09. And so the term DevOps actually came from the originations of DevOps Days. And so in 2009 in Ghent, Patrick Dubois and Chris Breitart and John Willis and Andrew Clay Schaefer and a whole bunch of other people threw the first DevOps Days. And that's where the term came from, so you can blame them. Now, just so you know, we don't really know how to spell it. Sorry. You'll see all different variations and so forth, but this is the conference and so forth. Now, as you probably already figured out by looking at the schedule, and this has morphed a little bit, one of the things about DevOps Days that makes it pretty unique is the way the schedule works. So in the morning, pretty much every DevOps Days, and I should say local organizers have 100% control over their program. It's not the global committee gives them tools and says, go forth. But generally, it's a single track of curated content in the morning. You have to listen to me, sorry. And then in the afternoons is attendee-driven open spaces. And we're going to get a lot more into this. But what I want to challenge you to do is start thinking now about things you want to get out of this conference. I say a lot of times, and this might be a little bit, maybe, I don't know if it's rude, but if you leave a DevOps Days event and you didn't learn what you came here to learn, your fault. Because this afternoon and tomorrow afternoon, you're going to be able to get up and say, I want to talk about Kubernetes. I want to play werewolf. I want to do these things. And other people will say, hey, I want to do that. And you'll be able to chat about it. Interesting thing is, little idea is Andrew Clay Schaefer. He had said something at an event a couple weeks ago. Matt paraphrased it. They really, at the time, they said, I don't even want talks. I just want people to get together and discuss the problems you're having and how you solve it and so forth. So the open spaces are going to be really important to your experience here at DevOps Days. Who's first time ever at a DevOps Days event? So the vast majority of the crowd. So this is where some people are like, what is this open space thing in the afternoon? We'll get into more than that. But if DevOps came from DevOps Days, what is DevOps? How do we define DevOps? Well, we refuse is how we do it. So it's funny because one of the things that a lot of people think is bad about the Agile movement is so many definitions, okay? So, oh, you're not doing Scrum because you didn't do that ceremony, or you're doing this, or what have you. And so it became very prescriptive, and that was never the original intent. And so the founders of DevOps Days said, we're not going to define it. We're going to say it's developing and operating software, people working together, but that's it. You can go further and define it from there, which had a lot of side effects, not necessarily good, but that's one of the things they did. Which means a bunch of people came up with their own. So I'm going to show you some of those. My favorite, over and above the one I wrote, which I'll show you in a second, John Willis and Damon Edwards came up with this thing called CAMS. Anybody familiar with CAMS? I don't want to, okay, a few people. When you think about DevOps, a lot of people talk about culture. Culture is the C in CAMS. If you don't have this one, forget the rest of them, it's not going to work. And by culture, I don't just mean be nice to each other and be empathetic and all that, which is absolutely true. You must do those things. I give a talk about burnout in the IT community. I think there's one today by somebody else. These are important parts of culture. But what I mean by here is culture is things like that product team of you build it, you run it, and giving people control and giving people access and those kinds of things. The A is for automation. Unfortunately, a lot of people think this is all DevOps is. They think DevOps is just automating deployments and automating AWS and so forth. And it's an important part of it, but it's certainly not what DevOps is. The next thing down is measurement. You can't tell if you get better if you don't measure where you are. And so, measure things. Measure your time to recover. How often you deploy, although I'm going to talk about that one in a minute. I'm not crazy about that as a metric. And some other things. But you have to measure what you're doing in order to move along. And the last one is sharing. DevOps days. Okay, we all win if we all share. It's funny because I work for one of the vendors, and we're sitting next to a competitor who we're actually also a partner with. Sharing is incredibly important. A gentleman by the name of Jez Humble added lean into here. I like the addition. Most effective organizations that are doing this kind of automated deploy to production that DevOps and continuous delivery imply have taken upon a lean flow kind of methodology as opposed to like an iterative development methodology. So comms is probably the most popular one among the people, us old people that have been doing this for a decade. So some others. Donovan Brown from Microsoft wrote this one, which I like a lot. And I wrote this one. The point is that you'll notice that really comms has automation as part of it. This one, that one, etc. They're culture and union of people and things like that. It's not I use Chef or Puppet or GoCD or Jenkins or whatever. It's a culture. It's the way of working together. So moving on with the timeline. In 2010, this book came out. Like a lot of the better technical books and solutions, it came out of some pretty horrific failures. Again, they were trying to deploy a lot of things to production environments. There was a couple projects. One of the ones that stands out the most was they were building Java software on Windows, deployed it to Solaris. When they deployed it to Solaris, it didn't work. And I don't mean it had a bug, I mean it wouldn't start. Something to do with the NFS file system versus local file system or what have you. But this book came out and really started to formalize a lot of the processes. Again, even the authors of the book would tell you they didn't really invent this. People have been doing automated build and test and deploy for decades. But this is where a lot of the stuff got formalized. Everybody started calling them pipelines. People started writing continuous delivery plugins and things for CD servers, et cetera. Continuous delivery is a big part of the A part of CAMS. Okay, so again, a lot of people say continuous delivery and DevOps are the same thing. They're not. This is the automation part, combined with other things like change management tools, et cetera. So about this time, something really unfortunate happened. And maybe this is because it wasn't properly defined, or probably not properly is the right term. Maybe because it wasn't formally defined, but all of a sudden, everything was a DevOps thing. It's like, I was a system admin yesterday, and today I'm a DevOps engineer. So it really became a big buzzword, and it's even bigger now. But I want to go through some things that that most of the early practitioners, the people around for DevOps Days in 2009 and since and so forth, there are some things that we do agree on. There's not very many, but there's a few. And I apologize because I'm going to insult some people, but I don't mean to. Most of us agree that DevOps engineer should not be a job title. Usually, this is the person that knows automation really well and so forth, and so, you know, they're an infrastructure automation person or what have you. But if you believe the definitions that DevOps is a culture of teams deploying something together, or a union of people, or et cetera, then you can't really have a union of people engineer. Okay, that's why when purists talk about this, and I'll get into the reality of this in a bit, but this is why we talk about it. Most of us believe that DevOps certifications also should not exist. If you're a manager and you want to send people to the 2-day courses so that they learn some of the terminology, learn how to do the research and stuff, that's great, but you can't certify somebody in union of people culture. It just doesn't make any sense. I won't go as far as some people. There are some of the original founders who call them outright scams. I'm not going to go that far, but I am going to say that they shouldn't exist. I work for a tool vendor. There's no such thing as a DevOps tool. Okay, I mean, call a monitoring tool a monitoring tool. Call a notification tool a notification tool, because DevOps is it's an umbrella thing. And if you set up another team, so Jez Humble, actually, I think there's actually a reference to it in a second, threw a big fit because people are like, oh, I set up a third silo. I have my development silo and my operations silo, so I'm going to set up a DevOps silo. It's like, no, adding a third silo does not solve silos. So, you know, as coaches, as what have you, great. A team that does all your automation, probably not going to be very effective. Open space topic. So moving on with the timeline. In 2013, Docker changed the world. They didn't do it first, not even close. Okay, containers were around for a long time before. How long depends on how you define a container, but I mean, you go all the way back to Chroot 20 years earlier. But Solaris Zones and LXC, and for those the techie nerds like me, Docker actually, its first runtime was LXC before they wrote their own. So it wasn't the first, but it did make it a lot more accessible. So why is this on a timeline for DevOps? Because it made it easier for applications to be deployed to production. We now had a standardized way, a container, where people could write their stuff in Golang or Python or PHP or Perl or whatever the heck they wanted to, and deploy it the same way. Of course, if anyone has ever actually tried to do that, that gets a little complicated if you're trying to do the orchestration, hence Kubernetes in 2014. And this is people searching for Kubernetes on Google Trends as of yesterday, pretty much eating the world. I heard somebody the other day refer to Kubernetes as the API for the cloud. I don't think that's actually all that wrong, you know, because you can use its control program. It's KUBECTL, if anyone's never done it. Some people call it kube control, some people call it kube cuddle, something like that. I know a person who, just to make people mad, calls it kubectl. Whatever. Okay, but you know, 3 or 4 slides ago I said DevOps is not about tools, and then I started showing you a bunch of tools, and it's like, well, is it or isn't it? Okay, so it's not. But the tools are a very important enabler. So now we can set up platforms on these different, you know, these are the public cloud stuff off the Cloud Native Foundation. But you know, public or private or what have you, what the platform does is give you a deployment target, give your teams a deployment target, make it a whole lot easier. In the US, we have a thing called cloud.gov for government organizations that takes care of, I think it's 116 out of 141 security controls. So all the operating system patches and all that kind of stuff is handled by the platform team, gives the application team more time to develop new features and sell more shoes. So it's not about tools, but tools are an important part. And of course, in the last, if you believe me, and it started in 2001, if you believe, you know, if you say it started in 2009 with the first DevOps days, there's a whole lot more to the timeline, but in a 30-minute window, that's what you get. So where are we at today? Where's DevOps and DevOps today? Now, interesting sidebar here. When I proposed this talk several months ago, I actually went into Slack under the core organizer for DevOps Days and said, hey, I want to create up a talk where we all more or less agree, and any of us could give it wherever we are in the world. So, you know, we have a core organizer that's in Brazil, and if he wants to give the talk in Brazil, it's the same talk. Here's the problem. Turns out we don't agree on very much. But again, that might be a good thing because your own biases are important. And I don't mean negative biases, but biases about the things that are right for your company and your organization and so forth. So this is my view. Well, this isn't my view. This is somebody else's view. There's a thing called State of DevOps Report. And the name's been reused by a couple others, but the original one came out of Puppet several years back and had some other sponsors. Full disclosure, we were one of the other sponsors. But what it did is went out and surveyed a bunch of people. Are you doing these things? Are you doing these things? Are you doing those things? And then asked them questions about, well, what's your time to restore service? What's your change failure rate? All that, and kind of tried to make some correlations. The early versions were very marketing driven. They just were, okay? But a couple of years ago, an organization came up called the DevOps Research and Assessment, DORA, and it's Gene Kim, who wrote the Phoenix Project and several other books, Jez Humble, who wrote the Continuous Delivery book, and Dr. Nicole Forsgren, who has a PhD in, it's a math, I don't remember which one. Sorry? Science. She says, she does a talk, says she scienced the crap out of it. But they went through and made the polls and the surveys scientifically valid, got it peer reviewed, got a white paper peer reviewed to talk about the math and are the questions loaded and et cetera. And so that's been true the last few years. And so, I mean, it's still something that someone's creating, but I think it's a good metric. Y'all can go download it. It's cloudplatformonline.com/2018. Well, it's right there. And the slides will be shared later. But the point that's kind of interesting here is that if you look at how they say, are you elite, high, medium, low, they use deployment frequency. Now, I'm not crazy about deployment frequency as a metric. Okay, one of the things that I quoted quite often as saying is it's not continuous delivery if you can't deploy right now. So I believe elite is on-demand deployment. I need to deploy right now because the feature's done. I have a security problem, whatever. Click. Multiple deploys per day is awesome if that fits your business, but if it doesn't fit your business, don't do it for the sake of doing it. Okay? If you're Adobe and you're creating Photoshop and you give me a new release every day, I'm going to be very angry with you because that's a lot of bandwidth to download, et cetera. So that's it. So what's interesting here is if you look at the bottom, a change failure rate, if everybody can read that, but it's 0 to 15% for elite, high, and medium. The elites can recover their time to restore in less than an hour, high and medium basically less than a day. And so although the change failure rates are the same, the cost of failure is significantly lower for the elite people because it's only down for an hour. They can recover a lot faster. A lot of people who don't want to deploy really often say that they think that deploying more often increases risk. They say, no, we want to deploy every quarter or whatever because we want to lower risk. Notice this, the low performers, between 1 per week and 1 per month, have a 46 to 60% failure rate. So there's so much in that release by the time it goes out that 50-50 chance basically that something's going to be wrong. And it takes them between a week and a month to recover. So they deploy a new software, somebody can't get blue shoes now for some reason, some bug that blue doesn't show up, and it takes them a week to be able to sell blue shoes. So if you don't want to deploy on demand, then don't, but work towards the capability so that you can recover. So DevOps Days in 2009, Matt, was Ghent the only one or did another one? Okay, so then in 2010 there were 6, 7, a few. Yeah, this is 2018. So DevOps Days is kind of off and running, doing pretty well. And so that makes us think, well, that means the culture's taking off, right? And the way the DevOps Days organizers originally, and just to be clear, I've only been on the core team for a year. I had nothing to do with coming up with the term. But the people who did, it must be what they're saying, right? Yeah, nope, reality check. If I search Google for DevOps tools, I did this yesterday or the day before, there's 31 million hits. If I search LinkedIn for DevOps engineer, there's over 100,000 jobs globally. If I search Google for DevOps teams, there's a whole bunch of things here. And so if you're looking for a job doing automation and doing the things and working in this kind of culture and whatever, okay, I admit it, you should search for DevOps engineer because that's what the recruiters are using to do it, and reality is reality. There's a few people in here that have known me for a few years, and they probably know me standing up here and saying that is a major change. I was the thou shalt person. I'll die on this mountain until very recently. But we do have to, reality is reality. Things change. And so I still don't think as a manager you should create a role called DevOps engineer. But if you're searching for employment and so forth, it is real. I did find this one amusing when I searched for DevOps team. This is Jez Humble saying that he wrote this thing, there's no such thing, in a fit of rage. And then MuleSoft saying you should have one. So what I said on Twitter on September 11th is DevOps is dead. Long live DevOps. And all that means is that things are happening now. There are tools from major vendors that call it a DevOps tool. This one, the Twitter thread, was about Microsoft changing the name of their stuff to Azure DevOps, and I was like, are you kidding me? But that's the reality. And so what Andrew Clay Schaefer says, who was the guy that wrote the hashtag first, is you get the DevOps you deserve. So what that means is that if you work hard to come up with a culture of sharing where people are working together to deploy applications and support them and so forth, and you work hard to understand which automation is the right automation, and should I use Kubernetes or shouldn't I? Just because I put it on a Google slide doesn't mean you should use it. It has to solve a problem for you. If you do all those things, then DevOps will be successful. If you create a DevOps team and you teach them a little bit of continuous delivery and change management, but your development teams still aren't really talking to the customers, and production still doesn't really know why they're running the app they're running, and so forth, it's not going to be successful. I mean, I've been doing the consulting for a decade. I've never seen it work, never. Which means that it's not important that you use my definition or Donovan's definition or CAMS or COMS or whatever. It's not important which definition you adopt. But inside your organization, it is important that you adopt something. That inside your organization, when you use the word DevOps, when you use the word continuous delivery, when you use the word unit test or functional test or whatever, that you agree with what it means. That's the most important thing. Okay, so if I had a hard time getting consensus on where DevOps is today, how do you think this went? Where is DevOps going? What's next year? What's 5 years from now? And I thought a lot about this, and it's funny because I was talking to some people yesterday saying, yeah, I'm still not done with my slides, because there's got to be something for this. And this is what I came up with. I don't know. I mean, so we're going forward, we have the things. Somebody joked we should rename DevOps Days to a CAMS Days instead of using the term DevOps. What I do know is who's going to figure it out. That I know. And so I can watch those people and I'm going to listen to them. And those people are you. I tried to do something fancy where I played with the camera and I was going to have the slide be the audience. And so pretend you see that, okay, because that would have been really cool. But it didn't work out. So what I mean by that is that it is going to be about the conversations and the community and so forth, and how we as a community want to implement these things and what we want to do and the tools we want to use and the behaviors we're going to reward when it comes to vendors and things like that. Okay? Now this kicks off with, and here's where I go back to DevOps Days organizer hat a little bit, the thing about the open spaces. So the term DevOps came out of an open space, basically. I mean, they call it Agile Infrastructure, the first one, but that was where it came from. Some of the best innovations I've seen have come out of these conversations where somebody gets up and says, I know I should know this thing, but I don't, and I'm going to admit that in front of the crowd. Can anybody else want to talk about this thing? And somebody else will go, sure, yeah, okay. Or, hey, I'm an expert in this. Can I share? I went to this other conference, or I went to Matt works for PagerDuty, and they just had their big thing a month ago or so. I went to this thing, and I saw the PagerDuty do this thing, and I can show you what they showed me. It's the sharing. It's the S, okay? And so I think I'd change CAM to big C, or comms to big C, little ALM, and big S. So it's about sharing and about the culture. I'm going to do an opening at 14:30 where I go into a lot more details about the rules about how open spaces work. I'm going to ask people to get up and stand in front of the crowd and say what your topic should be. We're going to figure out the areas. We'll go into all that in 2:30. But start thinking about the things you want to learn in this conference. And with that, I have 41 seconds for questions. Thank you very much. I'll leave it up to the organizers. I don't know, should we take one question or should we just call it?
So is there any question?
In the front?
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you put SAP Cloud Platform on the slide with all those tabs?
Why didn't I not put SAP?
Yes.
It's a screenshot from the Cloud Native Foundation, so they might not be members or something. It was just meant to be representational.
They are friends with with Pivotal's cloud.
Oh, Cloud Foundry or what have you?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
sorry, I forgot.
Don't know why they're not on there.
I think they deserve that.
Then they talked to Cloud Native Foundation about that. I just to be not biased myself, I literally took a screenshot of what was there listed as public cloud providers. Cool. All right. I think that's all the time we have. I know there's other questions, but as I mentioned, we'll have a break in between. I'll be around all 2 days. Happy to answer any questions.
So thank you to Ken.
Thank you very much.